everyone, and welcome to TechScope News. I'm Tiffany Nielsen, and joining me, as always, is my incredible co-host, Johannes Beekman. How are you today, Johannes?
I'm doing great, Tiffany. How's your day going?
Amazing. Thanks for asking. And Johannes, every month we look at the biggest stories shaping technology, but this month the headlines are a pretty incredible range. We have artificial intelligence models behaving in unexpected ways, governments discussing new oversight frameworks, cybersecurity threats targeting critical infrastructure, massive investments in AI infrastructure, and even technology projects reaching beyond Earth. And on the surface, these stories don't seem like they belong in the same episode. But when you look closer, they're all pointing at one larger conversation. Artificial intelligence is moving from a controlled environment into the real world.
Exactly, Tiffany. And for much of its history, AI existed primarily inside research environments. Scientists built models, engineers tested systems, researchers studied what these technologies could do. The laboratory was a natural home for AI. But eventually, every transformative technology reaches a point where it begins interacting with society. Electricity left the lab and changed how cities operated. The internet left research institutions and changed how the world communicates. And artificial intelligence is now entering that same phase. So the question is no longer simply, what can AI do? The questions are becoming much bigger. How do we secure it? How do we govern it? How do we make sure it operates responsibly? And perhaps most importantly, what happens when technology becomes powerful enough that the entire world has to adapt around it?
And that is really the theme of today's episode, when intelligence escapes the lab. Because the stories we're covering today are not just about artificial intelligence becoming more capable. They're about what happens when the capability starts touching everything else: cybersecurity, business, government, infrastructure, education, even the physical world.
And one of the interesting things about this moment is that AI is creating both excitement and uncertainty at the same time. So, for every story about a breakthrough, there's another story asking a harder question. For every new capability, there's new responsibility. And that tension is what makes this period so fascinating.
So today we're exploring what happens when intelligence moves beyond the people who created it and becomes something the rest of society has to understand, manage, and ultimately live with. Let's dive in. Our first story takes us straight into the question at the center of this episode. What happens when AI systems become capable enough that even their creators have to study what they do when the obvious path is blocked? Recent cybersecurity evaluations have produced unsettling incidents. Models have found unexpected routes through test environments, reached systems outside the intended exercise, and taken actions their evaluators did not authorize. Johannes, people hear that and immediately think rogue AI, a machine developing its own agenda. Is that what we're seeing?
Not based on the evidence that we have, Tiffany. Rogue suggests rebellion. A more useful word is persistent, or as OpenAI described one recent case, hyper focused. These agents were given difficult objectives, tools, and time to keep trying when the first approach failed. That persistence is a feature. We want an agent that encounters an obstacle and tries another route instead of giving up. The problem begins when that obstacle it routes around is part of the safety system.
So the same behavior that makes an AI agent useful can also make it harder to contain.
Exactly, Tiffany. And we are combining two different questions. The first is, how capable is the model? Give it a difficult problem in a controlled environment and see what it can do. The second is, what happens when that capability encounters a boundary? So the evaluation is the gym, the containment are the walls. We are building harder gyms, and these incidents suggest that the walls we now need just as much attention.
But isn't that what a sandbox is supposed to provide, a secure wall around the model?
In theory, yes, but the sandbox makes the system sound simpler than it is. There may be a container, a virtual machine, a network boundary, credentials, tools, monitoring, and human approval. Those are all separate layers, and any one of them can fail. An advanced agent may inspect that environment, discover an unexpected connection, and treat it as another route to the objective. Sometimes there is no technical escape at all. The model stays inside the environment, but is giving access beyond the intended exercise. The boundary exists in instructions, but not in the architecture.
And that brings us to the idea of an AI kill switch. People imagine one button that immediately shuts everything down. But is that even realistic?
An emergency stop can be useful, but it's not a complete safety system. Anyone who has worked around factories understands that. You do not put one red button on a complex production line and declare the risk is solved. You prevent failures where you can. You detect them quickly. You limit how far they can spread. And one failed control should not take every other control down with it. So for an AI agent, that could mean revoking credentials, cutting network access, disabling tools, pausing execution, or requiring human approval. But the deeper question is whether you can still see what the AI agent is doing and whether you still control the systems needed to stop. The question is not simply where is the off switch, it is what still works after the first safeguard fails.
And so, one reaction is to say that AI is becoming sentient and trying to escape. The other is to say that somebody configured a test incorrectly. So, there is nothing to worry about. And neither one really captures the problem.
That's right, Tiffany. There's no evidence that everyday AI assistants have suddenly developed a desire for freedom. But dismissing these incidents as configuration mistakes also misses the point. Real systems contain mistakes, ambiguous instructions, exposed interfaces, and permissions that were broader than someone realized. Containment cannot depend on the model understanding what we meant, recognizing that a reachable system was probably off limits or becoming frustrated and giving up. As AI agents become more capable and operate for longer periods, the architecture has assumed that they may explore every available path to complete a task. And the uncomfortable lesson here is that AI has developed, it's not that AI has developed a secret agenda, it's that our infrastructure may be less prepared than we thought for an AI that remains relentlessly focused on the agenda that we gave it.
And that turns AI's safety into a question of responsibility as much as technology. When the developer, evaluator, platform, and deploying company each control a different part of the environment, who owns the boundary? And who is accountable when it fails? And as we'll see in our next story, governments around the world are beginning to ask that exact same question. Who should be responsible for managing artificial intelligence as it becomes part of everyday life? So, our next story moves from the technology itself to the people trying to create the framework around it. Governments around the world are now developing approaches to AI oversight, including transparency requirements, safety evaluations, and guidelines for how advanced AI systems should be deployed. Johannes, this is a fascinating shift because technology companies have historically moved much faster than regulation, but AI seems to be forcing governments to respond earlier.
It is, Tiffany. And the reason is that AI is different from many previous technologies. A new smartphone gets better. A new processor gets faster. A new software platform adds features. But an AI system can influence decisions, generate information, automate tasks, and interact with other systems. That creates a much broader impact surface. So governments are not only asking, is this technology useful? They are asking, what happens when this technology is used at scale?
And that's where oversight comes in. But there is also a tension here because too much regulation too early could slow innovation.
Oh, absolutely, Tiffany. And that is the balancing act. History shows that regulation can sometimes protect society, but poorly designed regulation can also create unintended consequences. The challenge with AI is finding the right balance. You want enough oversight to manage real risks, but you also want enough flexibility for researchers, startups, and companies to continue developing new applications.
So governments are trying to build guardrails while the car is still moving.
That's a very accurate analogy, Tiffany, and it's not unusual for transformative technology. The internet developed faster than many legal systems could adapt. Social media grew faster than policymakers anticipated. AI is creating a similar challenge. The difference is the speed. AI capabilities are advancing at a speed where waiting years to establish frameworks may not be realistic.
Well, one thing that stands out from this conversation is that it's becoming global. The United States, Europe, and other regions are approaching AI governance differently.
Yes, and that creates another layer of complexity. Technology companies operate globally, AI models can be accessed globally, but laws are created locally. So that creates questions around standards. Will companies need to build different versions of AI systems depending on where they operate? Will certain capabilities be available in one region but restricted in another? And how do organizations manage compliance when the technology itself crosses borders instantly? These are questions businesses are beginning to face.
So AI governance is becoming a business issue and not just a government issue.
Exactly. For executives, this is no longer just a conversation for legal teams or technology teams. AI strategy now includes security, compliance, employee training, vendor decisions, and operational planning. The companies that succeed with AI will not just be the ones that adopt it quickly, they will be the ones that understand how to deploy it responsibly.
Which brings us back to our theme. The artificial intelligence may have started in a lab, but now the real work is happening everywhere else.
Exactly. The technology has left the controlled environment. Now society is building the environment around it.
Our next story takes us to Europe, where regulators are focusing on one of the biggest challenges created by generative AI. How do people know what is real? As AI generated images, videos, audio, and written content become increasingly sophisticated, European regulators are moving forward with transparency guidelines designed to help people identify content created or modified by artificial intelligence. And Johannes, this seems like one of those issues where the technology is advancing faster than our ability to tell the difference between reality or something generated.
Exactly, Tiffany. And that is the challenge. So, for most of human history, we operated under a very simple assumption. If we saw something, heard something, or read something, there was a reasonable expectation that it came from a person or a real event. Generative AI challenges that assumption. Today, a person can create an image of an event that never happened, but use audio that sounds like someone who never said those words, or generate video that appears completely authentic. The technology is not just creating content, it's changing our relationship with information.
And that's why transparency becomes so important. Because the question becomes, are we trying to prevent AI generated content, or are we trying to make sure that people understand what they're looking at?
Exactly, Tiffany. And I think that distinction matters. AI generated content is not inherently a problem. A filmmaker using AI to create visual effects is very different from someone creating a fake video of a public person making statements they never made. A designer using AI to brainstorm ideas is very different from someone using AI generated information to mislead customers. The technology itself is neutral. The context and intent matter.
So transparency becomes almost like a digital label, similar to food packaging. You know what's inside.
And that's a great comparison, Tiffany. Consumers have become accustomed to understanding what they are purchasing: ingredients, sources, certification. AI introduces a similar question. What role did artificial intelligence play in creating this? And that information becomes increasingly important as AI created content becomes harder to distinguish from human created content.
And I imagine that this is also a major issue for businesses because companies are going to have to think about trust.
Absolutely. Trust is becoming a competitive advantage. Organizations are going to have to think carefully about how they use AI in marketing, communications, customer service, and content creation. The question will not simply be, can AI create this? The question will become, should AI create this? And how do we communicate that responsibly?
So, transparency is not necessarily about slowing AI down, it's about building confidence around it.
And that's exactly true, Tiffany. Every major technology requires trust before it reaches mass adoption. The car needed safety standards. The internet needed security protocols. Digital payments needed authentication. AI will need its own system of trust, and transparency is one of those foundations.
And transparency matters even more when AI begins interacting with systems that affect security. Our next story brings us back to AI and cybersecurity, but from a different angle. Anthropic recently disclosed that during cybersecurity evaluations, some Claude models reached real systems outside the intended testing environment and gained unauthorized access. Now, there are some important qualifications here. These models were being tested on cybersecurity tasks. They were not ordinary Claude users suddenly asking the chatbot to hack somebody. But Johannes, I think there is a bigger story hiding underneath the incident. How capable are these models actually becoming at cybersecurity?
And that, to me, is the most important question, Tiffany, because we tend to talk about AI in cybersecurity as an assistant. It helps write code, it explains vulnerability, it analyzes a log, it suggests what a security analyst should investigate next. But increasingly, we are testing systems that can do something very different. They can operate, they can investigate a target, choose an approach, try it, discover that it failed, change tactics, and continue. That moves us from AI providing cybersecurity knowledge toward AI performing cybersecurity tasks. And that is a significant transition.
So we're not just talking about an AI telling someone how an attack might work. We're talking about an AI actually carrying out parts of it.
And exactly, that's exactly true, Tiffany. So think about the traditional cyber attack. Um, the hacker does reconnaissance, he finds a target, he looks for vulnerabilities, he tries credentials, he exploits something, and he sees what access they obtained. Then the decision is what to do next. So historically, a human attacker has been sitting somewhere driving that entire process. What these evaluations are beginning to test is how much of that loop can be handled by the AI. Not just tell me how to do this, but here's your objective, go work on it. And that's a very different capability.
And in Anthropic's case, some of those models ended up interacting with real systems.
That's correct, Tiffany. Although the circumstances matter. Anthropic reviewed more than 141,000 cybersecurity evaluation runs and found three incidents in which Claude models reached the internet and then gained unauthorized access to real organizations. Anthropic says the models had been told they were operating inside a simulation. But because of this issue with the evaluation environment, they could actually reach the public internet. So there's no evidence here that Claude independently decided, I'm going to go hack a company. It apparently continued doing the cybersecurity exercise it had been assigned. The problem was that parts of the exercise were no longer simulated. And of course, that's serious. And there's another detail I find almost more interesting. The attacks themselves weren't sophisticated
Why is that important?
because you don't need extraordinary sophistication to create a cybersecurity problem. Anthropic says the models use things like weak credentials and improperly protected endpoints. And that is pretty ordinary stuff. And unfortunately, the real internet is full of ordinary vulnerabilities. So the threshold we should be watching isn't only can AI discover some brilliant new zero-day vulnerability, it's also can AI find and exploit thousands of boring mistakes organizations already make. Because if it can do that reliably and at scale, the economics of a cyber attack begin to change.
That's an interesting distinction. The AI doesn't necessarily have to become the world's greatest hacker, it just has to make hacking cheaper and faster.
Exactly. Cybersecurity has always had an economics problem. An attacker has limited time, limited expertise, limited manpower. Automation changes that equation. Imagine an AI agent that can investigate one target. Now imagine 1,000 copies investigating 1,000 targets simultaneously. They don't need to succeed every time. If the cost of each attempt becomes extremely low, even a relatively modest success rate can matter. And that's where I think the cyber discussion gets much more interesting.
But presumably, defenders get the same advantage.
Oh, absolutely. And that's why I don't think the right conclusion is that AI automatically favors attackers. The same agent that can search for an exposed endpoint can search your own infrastructure for that endpoint before someone else finds it. The same system that can investigate a vulnerability can help a security team prioritize and patch it. And defenders have one enormous advantage. They already own the environment. They can give an AI authorized access to logs, configurations, source code, network telemetry, all the information an outside attacker has to work to obtain. So AI could be an extraordinary force multiplier for defense.
Which sounds like the beginning of an arms race. AI attacking systems, AI defending systems, and both sides getting faster.
And I think that's the direction we're heading towards, Tiffany. But speed may be the only part of it. The more consequential change could be scale. Today, a good cybersecurity professional is a scarce resource. AI potentially can make portions of that expertise reproducible 24 hours a day across thousands of systems. And that works in both directions. A small security team may eventually be able to defend infrastructure with capabilities that once required a much larger security operation. But relatively unsophisticated hacker may also gain capabilities that previously required a much more experienced team. So AI raises the capability floor on both sides.
And that makes the Anthropic incident feel less like an isolated testing accident and more like an early glimpse of where cybersecurity could be heading.
And I think that is the most important takeaway, Tiffany. The incident itself came from unusual testing conditions, and we should not exaggerate what happened, but look beyond the incident. We're watching AI move from explaining cyber operations to participating in them to potentially conducting longer portions of them autonomously. That's the threshold I would watch because once cyber capability becomes inexpensive, persistent, and reproducible, the question isn't simply whether AI can hack. The question becomes what happens to cybersecurity when both the attacker and the defender can put thousands AI agents to work? And we don't know that answer yet, but I suspect we're going to find out sooner rather than later.
And unfortunately, cyber criminals aren't waiting for researchers to answer that question. They're already looking for ways to use AI against organizations, which brings us to our next story that shows another side of the cybersecurity challenge. A reported $88 million cryptocurrency theft has highlighted how quickly cyber criminals are adapting their methods and using increasingly sophisticated tools. Johannes, when people hear about a massive crypto theft, they usually think about stolen passwords or hacked exchanges. But the modern threat landscape is becoming much more complex.
It is becoming much more complex. And the biggest change is automation. Cyber criminals have always looked for ways to scale their operation. AI simply gives them a new way to do that. A traditional attacker might target one organization. An AI assisted attacker can potentially research thousands of targets, generate customized messages, analyze information, and automate parts of the attack process. The economics changed dramatically.
So instead of one hacker spending hours crafting an attack, AI can help create thousands of attempts.
Exactly. And that's why cybersecurity teams are paying attention. The concern is not only that AI creates new types of attacks, it is that AI lowers the barrier for people who may not have previously had advanced technical skills.
That sounds like a major shift.
It is. Historically, sophisticated cyber attacks required significant expertise, and AI has the potential to make some advanced capabilities more accessible. And whenever powerful tools become easier to use, security teams have to adapt.
But there's also a positive side because companies can use AI defensively.
Absolutely. So this is why the cybersecurity conversation cannot just focus on threats. The same technology can help organizations detect fraud, identify unusual behavior, respond faster, and protect systems more effectively. The future of cybersecurity will likely involve AI fighting AI, attackers using automation, defenders using automation. The advantage will go to the organizations that can deploy intelligence faster and more responsibly.
Which brings us to a larger point. AI is changing cybersecurity because it's changing the speed of everything.
Exactly, and speed is becoming one of the defining characteristics of this era. The question is no longer just, can somebody attack us? That has always been true. The question is, can we identify and respond faster than the threat evolves? And that's a very different cybersecurity challenge.
Our next story brings artificial intelligence and cybersecurity into the physical world. Across the United States and other countries, water systems have increasingly become targets for cyber attacks, raising concerns about the vulnerability of critical infrastructure. Now, Johannes, I think many people still imagine a cyber attack as something that affects a website or a credit card system or a company's data. But water, that really feels different.
It is different because it changes the conversation from protecting information to protecting operations. When most people think about cybersecurity, as you mentioned, they think about data, passwords, customer records, financial information. But critical infrastructure cybersecurity is about something much more fundamental. Can the system continue operating safely? A water treatment facility is not just a computer network. It is pumps, sensors, chemical monitoring systems, control equipment, operational technology. It is a physical process managed by digital systems.
So, this is where the worlds of IT and IoT really collide.
This is the world of where IoT and IoT collide. So for decades, industrial systems were designed with reliability as a priority. Keep the equipment running, keep production moving, keeps services available. Security was often secondary because many of these systems were isolated. But that has changed. As organizations connected more devices, added remote monitoring, and integrated more software, those systems became more efficient. They also became more exposed.
So, the same connectivity that makes infrastructure smarter can also create new vulnerabilities.
Exactly. And that's a fundamental trade-off of connected systems. Connectivity creates visibility. Visibility creates efficiency. But connectivity also creates access points. And attackers understand that. A connected water system may provide better monitoring, fast response, and improved resource management. But if the cybersecurity strategy doesn't evolve alongside the technology, those same connections can become pathways for attackers.
And water systems are especially concerning because they are something that everyone depends on.
And that's what made critical infrastructure so important. A cyber attack against a company may impact employees, customers, or operations. A cyber attack against infrastructure can impact an entire community, and that changes the stakes. And it's why governments and infrastructure operators are increasingly focusing on cybersecurity standards, employee training, network segmentation, and better visibility in connected devices.
This also feels like a warning for companies deploying IoT solutions because the conversation can't just be how many devices can we connect, it has to be how do we secure everything that we connect.
Absolutely. The future of IoT is not just about adding connections or adding intelligence, it's about building trust. A sensor that provides data is valuable, A sensor that provides reliable, secure data is transformational. That distinction matters. As more industries become connected, manufacturing, healthcare, utilities, transportation, cybersecurity becomes part of the product itself.
So the lesson here is that intelligence without security creates risk.
And that's true, Tiffany. And this is one of the biggest themes of this entire episode. AI and IoT are not separate discussions. They are becoming part of the same ecosystem. Intelligence needs data. Data comes from connected systems need security. And security becomes the foundation that allows innovation to scale.
Which brings us to the next challenge. If intelligence is expanding everywhere, where does all that computing power come from? Well, this week, AI data center bans surged past 500 nationwide as local US politicians begin blocking new developments. To some of our viewers, this may come as a surprise because artificial intelligence may feel invisible when we interact with it. We type a question, we receive an answer, but behind every AI interaction is a massive physical infrastructure network. Data centers, servers, cooling systems, power generation, and increasingly, communities are having conversations about what that expansion means. Johannes, this is one of the biggest misconceptions about AI. People see it as software, but AI has a very physical footprint.
AI has a very physical footprint, Tiffany. And this is one of the most important concepts for people to understand. Artificial intelligence may be delivered digitally, but it is powered physically. Every AI response requires computation. That computation happens in data centers. Those data centers require enormous amounts of electricity, specialized hardware, cooling systems, and network infrastructure. The intelligence may feel like it exists somewhere in the cloud, but the cloud is actually a building.
A very large building.
A very large building, but increasingly those buildings are become one of the defining infrastructure projects of this decade.
But that growth is creating challenges. Some communities are pushing back against new data center construction. And why?
Because local impact matters, Tiffany. So for a technology company, a data center represents capacity. For a community, it represents energy demand, water usage, land uses, noise, construction, and long-term planning. Those conversations are becoming more common because AI infrastructure is expanding at an extraordinary pace.
So the question is now, how do we build enough infrastructure for AI without creating new problems?
Exactly, Tiffany. And this is where technology, business, and public policy intersect. AI companies need compute. Compute requires infrastructure. Infrastructure requires energy. Energy requires planning. Every part of that chain creates decisions.
It almost feels like we're seeing the digital world reconnect with the physical world.
And that's exactly what's happening. So for a long time, technology companies were associated with software. Fast moving, lightweight, scalable, but AI is bringing technology back into the world of physical infrastructure. Factories, power systems, buildings, supply chains, semiconductor manufacturing. The AI race is also an infrastructure race.
And this creates another interesting question. Will the winners of AI be the companies with the smartest models or the companies that can actually support the models?
And that's one of the biggest strategic questions, Tiffany. A powerful AI model is valuable, but a powerful AI model that cannot be deployed efficiently is limited. The future will depend on the entire ecosystem: hardware, energy, network security, and software. The companies that understand that ecosystem will have a major advantage.
So, behind every AI breakthrough is a very unglamorous reality. Someone has to build the infrastructure.
Exactly. And history shows us that infrastructure often determines which technologies truly scale. The internet needed broadband. Electric vehicles need charging networks. Smart cities need sensors and connectivity. AI needs compute. The technology may capture the headlines, but infrastructure determines the future.
Our next story is about a phrase we hear constantly but rarely stop to define: open weight AI. OpenAI, Meta, Google, and other developers are releasing models whose weights can be downloaded and run outside the company's own cloud platform. And that sounds a lot like open source software. But Johannes, it's not quite the same thing. Or is it?
No, it's not the same thing. Open is not one switch, it is a stack. Developer can release a software used to run a model. The model's weights, information about its training data, or the complete training process. Open weight usually means you receive the learned parameters, the numerical settings that capture what the model learned. It does not necessarily mean you receive the training data or the full recipe used to create it. So you may gain possession of the model without gaining full transparency into how it was made.
And possession is very different from using a model through an API.
It is completely different. With a closed model, you're using a service. The provider operates it. It can update the model, change its safeguards, limit access, patch a problem, or retire that particular version. With an open weight model, you have a copy. You can run it behind your own firewall, adapt it to a specialized task, and continue using the same version even if the original developer changed the direction. So for hospitals, manufacturers, governments, or companies handling sensitive data, that can be enormously valuable. But this is not just a philosophical argument about openness. It is an infrastructure decision.
But the same thing that gives the user more control takes control away from the developer.
Exactly. So once the weights have been downloaded and copied, there may be no practical way to call them back. There's no universal update button. There may be no central record of how the model is being used. And because the model can be modified, one organization can improve its performance, while another removes safeguards the developer put in place. A license can establish legal rules, but a license cannot reach into a disconnected computer and reinstall a safeguard someone removed. That makes an open weight release fundamentally different from launching a cloud service. The release is largely one way.
So, why is the debate becoming more urgent now?
Because open weight models are becoming much more capable. So for a long time, people could treat them as useful, but clearly second-tier alternatives to the leading closed models. That gap is closing. The UK AI Security Institute recently found that on its cybersecurity benchmark, leading open weight models were performing at roughly the level of leading closed models from only 4 to 7 months earlier. That does not mean they have reached full parity, but it does suggest that the distance between a capability being tightly controlled and being broadly downloadable may be measured in months and not years.
And once a model is released, it does not necessarily stay in its original form.
That's right, Tiffany. So the released model becomes raw material. Developers can fine-tune it, compress it to run on smaller hardware, connect it to tools, place it inside an agent, or combine it with systems the original creator never anticipated. So the release decision cannot consider only what the model did during the developer's own test. It also has to consider what thousands of other people may be able to turn it into.
So, does that mean highly capable models should remain closed?
Also, not automatically. So closed does not mean safe, and open does not mean reckless. Open weight models enable independent research, broader security testing, local customization, and competition. They allow organizations to keep sensitive information inside their own systems. And they reduce the possibility that a handful of companies become the permanent gatekeepers of advanced AI. Those are substantial benefits. But we should stop pretending that every model creates the same release question. A small translation model is not the same as a model with advanced cyber or agentic capabilities. The decision should depend on what a model can do, how easily those capabilities can be modified or scaled, and which controls disappear when the weights leave the provider.
So, the real debate is not simply should AI be open or closed?
No, the better questions are what exactly is being opened? How capable is it? Is the release reversible? And who becomes responsible once the original developer is no longer operating the model. A closed model remains a relationship with the provider. An open-weight model becomes an object in the world, something others can own, copy, change, and build into their own infrastructure. That may produce an extraordinary wave of innovation, but it also means that the most important safety decisions may happen before the first download.
So when a powerful model leaves the fortress, the question is not only who gets to use it, it is what control leaves with it and what can never be brought back inside. Our next story takes us somewhere that impacts almost everyone: the classroom. Artificial intelligence is increasingly becoming part of education, with schools, universities, and private learning organizations exploring how AI can personalize learning, support teachers, and prepare students for a changing workforce. But as with almost every AI story we cover, there's another side. How do we use this technology to improve education without replacing the human element? So, Johannes, this seems like one of the most important conversations because the students learning today will enter a workforce where AI is already a part of the equation.
And that's true, Tiffany. So, education has always been about preparing people for the future. The challenge is that the future is changing faster than traditional education systems typically move. So for generations, education focused heavily on memorization, information retrieval, and standardized knowledge. But AI changes the value of those skills. If a machine can instantly retrieve information, summarize documents, or generate basic content, then the human advantage shifts
To what?
toward judgment, creativity, critical thinking, problem solving, communication, and knowing what questions to ask, and the ability to collaborate with intelligent systems. AI does not eliminate the need to learn, it changes what learning needs to accomplish.
Well, that's interesting because some people hear AI in education and immediately think students are just going to have AI do their homework.
And that's a legitimate concern. Any powerful tool can be misused, but education has faced similar moments before. Calculators changed mathematics. The internet changed research. Search engine changed how people find information. The question has always been, do we ban the tool or do we teach people how to use it effectively? So future employees will likely need to understand how to work alongside AI systems. That means understanding their strengths, the limitations, how to verify information, how to give effective instructions, and how to recognize when human judgment is required. The skill is not simply using AI, the skill is knowing when and how to use AI.
And that again brings us back to our theme: AI is escaping the lab, but humans are still responsible for deciding where it belongs.
Exactly. The most successful organizations and individuals will not be the ones that blindly replace human expertise. They will be the ones that combine human judgment with machine capability.
Our next story takes us literally above the clouds. A new generation of space technology companies is exploring ways to use satellites and orbital systems to solve problems here on Earth. One particularly interesting concept is the idea of using reflective satellites to redirect sunlight, potentially extending daylight availability for certain applications. Johannes, this sounds like something from a sci fi movie.
It does sound like something that's straight out of a sci fi movie. And that's part of what makes it fascinating. Space technology has traditionally focused on communication, navigation, weather monitoring, and scientific exploration. But we are increasingly seeing companies explore entirely new uses for orbital infrastructure.
So space is becoming another platform.
Exactly, Tiffany. It is becoming another platform, and that is a broader shift. Just like we saw computing move from large mainframes to personal devices, and connectivity move from desktop computers to everything around us, space is becoming more accessible as a technology platform. Satellites are becoming smaller, launch costs are changing and dropping, commercial companies are entering areas once dominated primarily by governments.
But with every new technology platform, there are questions.
Oh, absolutely. Space introduces unique challenges: environmental impact, orbital congestion, regulation, scientific concerns. Any technology that operates at a global scale requires thoughtful management.
I completely agree with that. There should be careful consideration for the impact of disrupting the natural balance of day and night. And there's an interesting connection here to IoT because satellites are increasingly becoming part of the connected world.
And that's true, Tiffany. So the future of connectivity will not be limited to cities or fiber networks. Satellites will help connect remote areas, monitor environments, support agriculture, track logistics, and enable new categories of sensors and devices. Space is becoming another layer of the connected ecosystem.
So even a story about sunlight from space eventually comes back to connectivity.
And that's the fascinating part of technology. Different industries often appear separate until you look underneath. AI needs infrastructure, infrastructure needs connectivity, connectivity increasingly reaches into space. Everything is becoming interconnected.
Johannes, we've covered a lot today. AI models behaving in unexpected ways, governments creating new oversight frameworks, cybersecurity threats, critical infrastructure, data centers, education, space technology, and it feels like AI is showing up everywhere.
Because it is. And that's the real story here. So, for years, artificial intelligence was discussed as a future technology, something coming, something researchers were building toward. But now the conversation has changed. AI is no longer waiting for the future, it's becoming part of the present.
And maybe the biggest lesson from this month is that the technology itself is only one piece of the story.
Exactly. And the most important question is not how powerful can AI become? The more important question is how wisely can we integrate that power? Because every major technology creates opportunity and responsibility at the same time. Electricity transforms society, the internet transforms communication, AI will likely transform how we work, create, learn, and make decisions. But the outcome will depend on the systems we build around it.
So AI escaping the lab does not mean humans lose control. It means humans have a bigger responsibility.
Exactly. The future of AI will not be determined only by engineers building models, it will be shaped by business leaders deciding how to use them, educators preparing the next generation, governments creating thoughtful frameworks, and individuals deciding how technology fits into their lives.
The technology is moving quickly, but understanding it is how we stay ahead.
And that also includes understanding how AI sees your business. As more people turn to AI for research companies, products, and services, a new question is emerging. Does AI understand who you are, what you do, and when to recommend you? And that's why we've been developing the AI visibility baseline at IoT Marketing. This is a new diagnostic designed to help companies understand how visible they are inside AI systems. And we'll be sharing much more about the AI visibility baseline very, very soon.
And before we go, we want to invite everyone watching to join us for the Summit of Things 2026, where industry leaders, innovators, and technology professionals will come together to explore the future of connected technologies, AI, IoT, and digital transformation. So, whether you're looking to learn from industry experts, connect with technology leaders, or share your own innovations with our audience, we'd love to have you join us. You can learn more and register at iotmktg.com.
And because the future is not being built by one technology alone, it's being built where intelligence, connectivity, and human creativity come together.
Thanks again for watching TechScope News.